A reading from the first letter of St. Paul to the Corinthians. Brothers and sisters, learn from myself and Apollos not to go beyond what is written, so that none of you will be inflated with pride in favor of one person over against another. Who confers distinction upon you? What do you possess that you have not received? But if you have received it, why are you boasting as if you did not receive it? You are already satisfied. You have already grown rich. You have become kings without us. Indeed, I wish that you had become kings, so that we also might become kings with you. For as I see it, God has exhibited us apostles as the last of all, like people sentenced to death, since we have become a spectacle to the world, to angels and men alike. We are fools on Christ's account, but you are wise in Christ. We are weak, but you are strong. You are held in honor, but we in disrepute. To this very hour we go hungry and thirsty. We are poorly clad and roughly treated. We wander about homeless and we toil, working with our own hands. When ridiculed, we bless. When persecuted, we endure. When slandered, we respond gently. We have become like the world's rubbish, the scum of all, to this very moment. I am writing you this not to shame you, but to admonish you as my beloved children. Even if you should have countless guides to Christ, yet you do not have many fathers, for I became your father in Christ Jesus through the gospel. The word of the Lord.
The responsorial psalm. The response is, the Lord is near to all who call upon him. The Lord is just in all his ways, and holy in all his works. The Lord is near to all who call upon him, to all who call upon him in truth. The Lord is near to all who call upon him. He fulfills the desire of those who fear him. He hears their cry and saves them. The Lord keeps all who love him, but all the wicked he will destroy. The Lord is near to all who call upon him. May my mouth speak the praise of the Lord, and may all flesh bless his holy name forever and ever. The Lord is near to all who call upon him.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. While Jesus was going through a field of grain on a Sabbath, his disciples were picking the heads of grain, rubbing them in their hands, and eating them. Some Pharisees said, "Why are you doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath?" Jesus said to them in reply, "Have you not read what David did when he and those who were with him were hungry? How he went into the house of God, took the bread of offering, which only the priests could lawfully eat, ate of it, and shared it with his companions. Then he said to them, 'The Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath.'" The Gospel of the Lord.
The first reading comes from 1 Corinthians 4, 6b to 15. In this passage, Paul uses himself and Apollos as an example of serving the gospel but not being filled with pride. And he says it's wrong for people in the community to judge themselves as superior simply because they receive certain gifts from God. That in fact, what God has called us to is service, and we should serve others in great humility. He gives the example of the fact that the apostles, even though they've been given great authority in this new church, nevertheless have suffered. They almost seem to be cursed because they're held in disrepute. They go hungry and thirsty. They're homeless, etc. What is Paul trying to say? He's saying that we shouldn't judge things with an earthly set of values. That's exactly what the Corinthians have been doing. They've used their spiritual gifts as a way of becoming more powerful, more important than others. And that's the very wrong thing to do. And so he invites the Corinthians to think with a heavenly logic. At the end of the passage he says, "I'm writing this not to shame you." Well, that's a nice statement, but he in fact is writing to shame them. Because They have been acting in a foolish way, in a childish way. Not childlike, but childish. And therefore, he, as their father in the faith, is inviting them to grow up, to be more responsible. And more responsible means also more humble. Remember, the gifts that we have received from the Spirit were not given for ourselves, for our self-aggrandizement. They were given so that we might serve others. And when we serve others, it's the greatest gift God could ever give us, because He's given us the ability to express our love to others. The Gospel is from Luke 6, 1-5. The Pharisees asked Jesus why the disciples are plucking grain in the field on the Sabbath. Now remember, the Pharisees wanted to build a fence around the law. They wanted to take the law to its widest possible interpretation to make sure they weren't breaking the smallest part of the law. Oddly enough, in the law, you're allowed to pluck grain as long as it's for immediate use. You can't harvest grain, but you can pluck it in the field and just pop it in your mouth. They weren't breaking the law, but the Pharisees were so intent on keeping the law that they exaggerated it. What does Jesus say? Don't you know that at times you have to break the law to do what's right? Look at how David ate the showbread when he was fleeing away from Saul. He did what was illegal. And yet we don't condemn him. Furthermore, the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. Remember, Jesus calls himself the Son of Man. He is the Lord of the Sabbath. He is the one who has the authority to loose and to bind, to make the rules about how we keep the Sabbath. Therefore, should not be condemning what his disciples are doing, because Jesus is the one who has given us the freedom of the children of God. We're not called anymore to be scrupulous observers of an external regulation, but rather we're called to live in the freedom of Christ, which leads us to greater love. And may God bless us.